Today we're going to be crocheting this very quick and easy beanie. And I am working with two different colors of size 4 medium weight wool yarn by the Cascade yarns. I'm also using a size G or 4 1/4 millimeter crochet hook. And you're going to want to grab a safety pin or a stitch marker for this. And we're going to begin with a magic circle, so take your tail and drape it over your working yarn and pinch that intersection. Insert your crochet hook and then yarn over and pull through your loop. Next, we're going to separate our loop out like this. And we're going to chain 2 and then place 12 double crochets inside of our magic circle. And if you're unfamiliar with any of the stitches used in this pattern, please check the links in the description for my stitch tutorial videos. Once you have your 12 double crochets in place, then go ahead and tighten the gap in your circle by pulling on that tail. And from here, we want to skip our little chain 2 right here and place a slip stitch in the top of our first double crochet. And for row 2, we're going to chain 2 and then we're going to place 2 double crochets in each stitch in our row, starting in this same stitch where we placed a slip stitch at the end of our last row, for a total of 24 double crochets. And at the end of this row, you're going to skip your slip stitch and your chain 2 and then place a slip stitch in the top of your first double crochet. And from here we want to change colors, but I don't like to cut and tie off my yarn a lot. So what I'm going to do is use my safety pin or stitch marker to preserve my loop here. So take your crochet hook out of your loop and then just insert your stitch marker in the loop to hold it. Now we're going to attach our next color to our crochet hook using a slip knot. And we want to try to dive right here into this same exact stitch where we just placed our slip stitch. And make sure that your working yarn is on the back side of your project. From here, we are going to yarn over and pull through our stitch and then yarn over and drop our 2 loops. And we're going to place a chain 1. Starting in this same stitch where we just inserted our crochet hook and we placed a slip stitch at the end of our last row, we're going to place 1 double crochet. And in our next stitch, we're going to place 2 double crochets. So that's going to be our pattern going all the way around our row, alternating between 1 and 2 double crochets, for a total of 36 double crochets. Make sure that your stitch marker and working yarn for your previous color are in the back of your project, and we're going to skip our little single crochet chain stitch right here, and we're going to place a slip stitch in the top of our first double crochet. For our next row, we're going to chain 2 and we're going to place 1 double crochet back in this same stitch where we just worked. And that's the stitch where you've already placed your slip stitch in the previous row. We're going to place 1 double crochet in our second stitch, and then we want to place 2 double crochets in our third stitch. And we're going to repeat this going around our row for a total of 48 double crochets. And again, we're going to skip our slip stitch as well as our chain 2, and then we want to place a slip stitch in the top of our first double crochet. And from here, we're going to trade out our crochet hook and our stitch marker. So we're basically marking our current loop and then sliding our crochet hook in our old loop. Once you have your previous color on your crochet hook, go ahead and chain 4. And this should bring your working yarn up to your current row, so you can adjust the number of chains as necessary. Again, you want to move the working yarn from your previous color to the back of your project so you don't accidentally work over it. From here, again, we're going to slide our crochet hook in that stitch where we placed our slip stitch. We're going to yarn over and pull through our loop, yarn over and drop our 2 loops, and then place a chain 1. From here, we want to place 1 double crochet in our first 3 stitches, and just like the other rows, we're going to begin this row in our current stitch where we've already worked. So that's 1 double crochet in these first 3 stitches, and then we're going to place 2 double crochets in our 4th stitch. And then we're just going to repeat that pattern going all the way around our row for a total of 60 double crochets. And when you get to the end of your row, you're going to want to make sure that your stitch marker with your old loop is in the back of your project before we join. And we're going to skip our little single crochet chain 1, and then we're going to place a slip stitch in the top of our first double crochet. From here, we're going to chain 2, and then we want to place 1 double crochet in our first 4 stitches. And again, we are working in our current stitch for that first stitch. And then we want to place 2 double crochets in our 5th. We're going to repeat that going around our row for a total of 72 double crochets. And again, at the end of our row, we're going to skip our slip stitch and our chain 2, and then we're going to slip stitch into the top of our first double crochet. And from here, we're going to trade out our crochet hook and stitch marker. And now that we're in our previous color, go ahead and chain 4. And so again, just like before, we want to make sure our working yarn is in the back. And then we want to slide our crochet hook in our current stitch where we already placed a slip stitch. Yarn over, pull through our loop, and then yarn over and drop our 2 loops and add that chain. And the pattern for this row is to place 1 double crochet in each stitch in our row, including that current stitch where we already placed our slip stitch. And again, make sure that your working yarn from your previous color as well as that loop are on the back side of your project. And again, we want to skip our little single crochet chain stitch and place a slip stitch in the top of our first double crochet. And for our next row, we're going to chain 2 and then place 1 double crochet in each stitch in our row, going all the way around and starting in our current stitch where we've already placed a slip stitch. Again, at the end of our row, we should have a total of 72 double crochets. And when you make it to the end of your row, you're going to skip your slip stitch and your chain 2, and then you're going to place a slip stitch in the top of your first double crochet. And from here, we are just going to repeat our last 2 rows, this last color section here, over and over to build the body of our beanie. And I followed that pattern until I had a total of 9 different sections of color changes here. And I encourage you to add some additional rows if you want your beanie to be slouchy or if you're making this for someone with a larger head. Whenever you get this to your desired length, we're going to cut and tie off both strands of yarn. And I like to hide my tail in the direction I was crocheting for a few stitches and then up the inside of my beanie. And once you're done hiding your tails, your beanie should look something like this. Thank you so much for working with me, and I hope you have a wonderful, awesome day.